Welcome, everyone. It's 2:32. I think we'd like to call the meeting to order, if I might. Folks, I'm welcoming everyone here today. And I'd like to acknowledge with respect that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin speaking people, and we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. We hear that acknowledgement a lot, but I think it's every now and then I'd like to pause and actually think about what it's saying. And here we are discussing environmental issues, presumably. And I think we need to keep that in mind. There's little fingers touch on so many aspects of our lives and our city. And I feel good about the way we're headed, but we want to keep on a good track. So call to order. I need approval of the agenda for this meeting. Do I read this recommendation, Amanda? Do I just read the recommendation that the agenda of the Environment Committee meeting of June 19, 2023 be adopted as presented? And we don't need a seconder or a motion, we just vote. Motion, I'll move. Okay, I can move it. So good. I move that we adopt it. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. So then the acceptance of the minutes, recommendation that the minutes of the Environment Committee meeting held April 17, 2023 be adopted as presented. Any changes or Karen? I have to, just give me a second, Karen. I have to, there you go.
David, I would like to recommend that under number 3, public participation, rather than residents, we use the word citizens as an open invitation to participatory democracy and to acknowledge that citizens have rights and responsibilities, maybe more than residents of implies. So I would recommend that going forward, we use citizens.
Is that the minutes?
It's number 3.
Number 3, thank you.
Residents of Sunridge Valley Drive.
And you would like to change that too?
I'd like to change it to citizens residing at 777 Sunridge Valley Drive.
Any comments from anyone on this one? Discussion? I think my impression is that residents says, I have no objections to making a change, but I thought the word resident would imply a citizen residing at.
Just wanted to offer that as a way to encourage, as I say, democracy.
Okay.
But I can accept that we don't change it.
So you could, we can make that change though, I believe. I hear your comment. Nobody's objecting at this point, from what I can gather. Do I need a motion for that? What do I do?
We can change it in the minutes if that's what the committee agrees to and moves.
I'm okay with it. Anyone else? Yeah, we're going. I think let's make that change. We need to vote on that too. So we just, all those in favor of that slate change? Opposed? It's passed, unanimous. And we need to accept the minutes. A motion to accept the minutes then? All those in favor? Yeah. And public participation, members of the public have this opportunity to speak. Comments pertaining to the following matters have been subject to a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting by law 1913 CD 33 2350 Suk Road. Are there any participants in the room or interested in speaking at this time? I think the proponent for the tree bylaw permitting item perhaps can speak at that time, if they're in the room. Okay, moving on. Number 5, new business. I guess 5.1, we have Gord Beauvillier as manager of parks. We'll speak to the 608 Kelly Road tree removal request. There's a recommendation before us that the Environment Committee recommend to Council that staff work with the resident at 608 Kelly Road with respect to retaining 2 protected mature Douglas fir trees located in the city right-of-way and as many of the private trees as possible. So keep that in mind while we're enjoying Gord's presentation. Thanks, Gord. Yeah, so we'll reset here for a second while they fix the technical glitch. we're back. It looks like. I'll remind everyone in the committee that as you speak, the camera rotates up here to the person that's speaking. Just be aware that that's there. Gord, you have a presentation for us and some.
Thank you, and through the chair. I don't have a presentation today, but I do have the report here that I can speak to and answer any questions. Summary, we have 10 trees, 10 Doug fir trees. 2 of them are on the road frontage, the city right of way along the front. 8 of them are private trees. And there is the resident would like to do some improvements to the driveway, repair the driveway, as well as do some proactive improvements to the services coming into the residence. 2 arborist reports done, one by the city and one by the resident, contracted out by the resident. The arborist reports do say that we can retain the 2 city trees, even with removing to grade the 8 other trees with increased risk to the city Douglas firs. In both arborist reports, it does refer to the risk, and they do recommend that if we are to retain our trees and remove all the other 8 trees, it's probably better to just get rid of all the trees instead of trying to retain. The increased risk, the increased cost to now, maintain and monitor both those trees. So staff is recommending that we work with the resident to make sure that we're not missing anything as far as trying to retain the trees and still being able to do the improvements to the residents. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much. Gord, is an opportunity for questions of Gord. Okay, just give me a second there, Karen. Sorry, I need to turn you on. Here we go.
In the letter from the applicant, they say that verbal approval has been given to remove 8 of the 10, the privately owned trees, for the purposes that they want to remove them to repair the driveway and for future construction. And I'm just wondering when they get that verbal approval from the municipality, does it come from you or does it come from buildings, or which department handles the approval?
I believe the verbal approval, when discussing on site with the resident, removal of the trees to grade, they're allowed to do. So it was the excavation of all the roots, and that would actually cause we wouldn't be able to keep any trees if we started to pull roots, started to take the trunks out and that sort of thing. They are permitted through our bylaw to remove the trees. We can retain our city trees at a higher risk, but they are actually able to still remove the trees on their private land according to our bylaw. So that was the fact that they could remove the trees to grade, but it was when we were discussing how and what they were going to do with the root system and actually the trunks and starting to pull those trunks, that's when it was going to affect. So we would no longer be able to retain our trees or the city trees if they started to pull the roots and that sort of thing.
Questions? Further questions? Anyone? Devin?
Okay, so you will have a chance to represent yourself. Okay, I'll wait till then.
Okay. I guess that point you just made is the one I'd like clarified, that the 8 trees on the private that are private can be removed because they interfere with possible infrastructure, or is that the reason?
According to our bylaw, our urban bylaw right now, they're able to remove those trees, yes.
Okay. Leaving the 2 municipal trees at higher risk.
At higher risk, yeah.
And could you speak just for a quick minute, though? I think in the report I said something about the discoloration of one of the municipal trees, slight discoloration, and the high crown. Is that indicate trees that are already been manhandled a bit, yeah? Or-
Well, the high crown is due to the hydro pruning. Yeah, so I mean, they have been heavily pruned through the hydro pruning. There was some discoloration, but the arborist was confident that the tree is still healthy and fine and be able to.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Gord. And sorry, Karen? Come in.
In your conclusion, in your report, you say city values its urban forest and stands firmly in the protection and management of existing trees. There's clear direction from documents such as the OCP, Parks and Rec, Master Plan, and Council that city-owned trees should be protected and only removed where necessary. And I'm going to ask you a tough question, but when I read that, I wondered, how do you define necessary?
That is a tough question, and that's why we are going to be making amendments to our urban tree bylaws to be able to clarify, when absolutely necessary. I would think that in repairing the driveway, in proactively, looking at his services, the services are right through, a massive critical root zone of probably 4 to 6 trees. So very likely he has services running through roots and that sort of thing. So to correct that, and if there's no other way to correct that, then that would be a reason why, or there's no other avenue to take, then that would be the reason why we would have to remove the trees.
Okay. I'm getting there. So, yeah, you can push if it's flashing. You're in line. Who's first here? I think so.
Gord, I have a question about the risk that you referred to. So if these 2 trees were left standing by themselves, are they at a greater risk of coming down either on the citizen's house or neighboring houses or even across Kelly Road?
The arborist designate the targets as the hydro lines and the city road. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just give me a second, John. Lois, who's next here? I think Lois is next, right? Okay, there you go. Now you're on.
So in the process of discussing with the homeowner how to best work through this, the thing that occurs to me is this issue is being viewed within the context, as it has to be, of that property. But when you look at the aerial photos, there are in the neighboring properties also a lot of other trees that have presumably interconnecting root systems and are affected by the watershed changes. And so it just occurs to me that where possible, just talking about the city trees right now, even if it were to seem as though the ultimate fate of those trees may not look great, the longer they could be preserved while the surrounding property trees are able to adapt to the change situation. I just wonder if that's a consideration that you take into account when you're making these negotiations or recommendations with the homeowners.
It is, yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
You push your button and that flashing green means you're next. Or the solid ice, yeah. And then it's red, it's not.
So I know that the tree bylaws are being revamped. Is there some sort of ETA, and does any of this become like, you know, retroactively, going to affect what's going on here?
The amendments the interim amendments that we're doing to the tree bylaw wouldn't change the same, we would have the same situation. There would be more onus on having reports done. Maybe there would be, the resident would need a letter from Hydro to say, you know, Hydro agrees that there needs to be something done with this, or not Hydro, but Fortis, that needs something done with the gas line, and CRD Water, which, you know, they're concerned that the water line's running through the root system, and that they recommend. So those types of letters and reports, an arborist report done by an arborist, which the resident has done, it would put the onus on the residents to have all of that information and make sure that when they come to their tree permit, they're showing that, you know, there's really nothing else that can be done but to actually remove the root system, to be able to repair the driveway and upgrade the services. So we would still be in the same situation with the amendments that are going to come now.
Okay, thank you. Yvonne?
Yeah, so I see that if the assumption would be if we remove the trees, that they would have to do replacement trees. If we removed all 10, we're looking at 20 replacement trees. How many trees would the city be willing to take on as a replacement tree, given that you say it's going to be triple for trees to be triple the cost per tree, essentially? So if Emily per se can't put all the trees on her property, how many can the city absorb?
The city could absorb all the trees
All the
that are
trees,
included
okay.
in this. Yeah.
Okay, no issues there. Okay, thank you.
Lois?
Thank you. I would just observe that this is sort of a classic case of trees versus concrete. And no matter, you know, if you're going to put in double the number of trees, you're going to eventually end up with the same kind of root situation competing with the concrete on a driveway or foundation or wherever. I know that some municipalities have some rules regarding or some incentives regarding having driveways and patios and things like that that are permeable, that might kind of reduce or there may be other materials that the driveway could be, that a new driveway could be composed of in order to alleviate future problems. And I just wonder whether that is ever something that becomes part of the discussion or negotiation.
With the urban forest strategy that the city is putting together right now, those will definitely be in those discussions will be in that, as well as through the urban forest strategy, even more revision to our urban forest bylaw, to the recommendations to fall more in line with some of the neighboring municipalities such as Sandwich and Victoria, which do really have better guidelines and are able to kind of guide that conversation when we are looking at stuff like this, as to pavement versus pavers versus gravel, that sort of thing, for driveways and that sort of stuff.
Thank you very much, Lois and Karen.
I really appreciate all the work that has gone into this and 2 arborist reports. I think that's very impressive context workup. It looks like both of the city trees are in reasonably good health, except for that canopy situation. I went to the site in question to check the trees on probably one of the windiest days ever, Saturday, and the prevailing wind seemed to come from the northwest, and the 4 trees, not the center island, but the 4 towards West Shore Mall there, were the ones taking the brunt of the wind. So they're pretty resilient. But once all 10 trees are gone, all of the other trees will be affected by wind shear. And I guess that's always the concern of how do you balance the public interest, which Lois referred to, you know, the root systems, the water, all of those consequences of tree removal. How do you balance what is really in the interest of public carbon storage and so on with private landowner rights? So I don't know if you've got any comments on that, Gord, but I'd love to hear them.
You're absolutely right. It's very challenging how with the tree replacement plan, even though we are replacing at a 2-to-1 ratio, it is very hard once those trees are gone to replace everything that those trees are doing, both in the climate and in with hydrologically as well. So yeah, it's a very hard decision. And that's why we're here today, is to have those discussions on, you know, what's best for those 2 trees. It is 8 trees that would be removed. With the tree permit, it is in the arborist's recommendations and observation that those 2 trees could be retained. So with a, and I believe in these, even in the city contracted arborist report, it says a slight increase or a small increase to the wind shear to those trees. So that, but it does carry a risk. It's when we get into removing those roots, that's kind of where we are with this, is that the trees can be removed to grade and we can still retain. With the work that wanted to be done, I believe that the resident, you know, is in the thinking that all those roots need to come out to get the work done. And once those come out, there is no retaining those other 2 trees. So that's kind of the.
Yeah, thank you, Gord. I do notice the, if you're looking at the property from across the street, I was just earlier today, Bank of Nova Scotia parking lot, there's a tree on the neighbor to the right, south side, I guess, which looks like it might be a little exposed if all those trees came out. I think perhaps Karen was alluding to the sort of the downstream effects. I would also like to ask at this time, before we bring the proponent, Lois, I'll let you speak too, but the idea of working with the resident, it's in our recommendation here to try to come up with a solution of perhaps keeping some of the Douglas firs on the private property. I guess that's kind of open-ended at this point. There's no clear plan or presentation or specific item to be put forward. It's a bit of an awkward question.
No, I think that's where we need to start the conversation. I mean, we do have, we could look at stump grinding instead of removing, and if that would be
Right.
how we could do it. But that would, yeah, that's where and in those conversations, when we're having those conversations, we can also work with the resident when it comes to the tree management plan as well. And because it is going to be a large one and it's going to be, quite a few trees to replace. The staff would work with the resident as well to come up with a good idea. If it came down to where we're going to remove trees, to come up with a good tree management or tree replacement plan as well.
Thank you very much. Lois, would you like to add something? I
Yes.
think we'll be calling the proponent to this podium shortly but go ahead.
It's about the replacement trees. And when we look at the carbon sequestering ability of the trees that are there, the resident has said that they're interested in doing deciduous trees, which of course, are habitat for completely different kinds of insects and birds so that part of it isn't going to be similar, but I'm just wondering if the city has any requirements or flexibility in terms of perhaps having large trees with similar carbon sequestering capacity to what's being removed. So maybe rather than a 2-to-1 ratio, a 1-to-1, but trees that are really significant. But plus I'm also wondering if the city were to remove, or if you were to remove the city-owned trees or the co-owned trees, what would your standards be for what they would be replaced with?
As far as the urban forest bylaw, the standards, we don't require larger trees. Larger trees are significantly more money right now, I think at cost. I think right now in the bylaw, I can't recall right. I don't have the bylaw in front of me right now, but it does refer to what we would accept as far as a tree, and they're very just standard. I think 5-centimeter caliper trees, and there's no, you can't even compare the two compared to what these mature trees are. In the talks with the resident, we could look at the tree replacement plan. We could look at larger trees, larger caliper trees. I can't speak for the resident, but regular landscapes usually don't have large Doug firs or big leaf maple or anything like that in landscapes. I think they would be looking at more like a street tree, maple trees, maybe smaller maples. But I don't know. I haven't seen the tree replacement plan from the resident yet. In our revised bylaw, we very well could, have some better standards as far as replacing some larger, significant trees. They are very hard to find. Usually takes a lot of pre-ordering and that sort of thing, depending on the size of the tree, and at quite a significant cost to purchase as well as to plant. So it's very hard for us to, unless it's for the average resident, it'd be very hard to come by a larger significant tree, larger than 5 or 6 centimeter caliper. Once we get into like 10 plus, very hard trees to get and costly.
Okay. No. I almost wiped out this system. Thank you very much, Gord. And at this point, I'd like to bring the resident up to the microphone if she would. Are you Emily? Perfect. Could you come out and introduce yourself and let us hear what you have to say? That's great. And by the way, folks, Gord's not leaving the room, right? So we can always ask him more questions as we go. Thank you.
Here, sorry. Oh, it's good. Okay. Hi, I'm Emily Granlin, one of the owners at 608 Kelly Road. I don't know. What would you like from me?
Well, we got I believe you wrote
I did,
the email,
yes.
right? And I read through it, and thank you for that. It's very thorough, and I thought seemed very fair. I explained, I think the situation, if there's something additional or something you'd like to underline in the email, the one thing I would like you to speak to actually specifically, because I would ask this question anyhow, is if you would talk a little bit then about your plans with the house and what's driving this whole process really from your perspective. Would appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so I realized that I hadn't included it in the email, but I do have some sketches that kind of outline what our plans with the addition. So if anybody isn't familiar with the email that I sent out, but the long-term plan for us, the reason that we are looking at upgrading utilities and things like that is that we are planning an addition off the front of our house. And our septic system is not going to support that. We had already removed or disconnected our gas line with the roots there. And essentially putting any addition off the front is also going to disrupt those root systems, especially the one of the very large Douglas fir trees is closer to our home. And so the roots come quite a bit into that area. One of the things I did also want to speak to was somebody, Lois maybe, had asked about a permeable driveway, and it is something that we're already looking into doing, those tiles that you could do gravel on top or grass or something like that, because we do have this massive paved driveway, which is not, it's how the house was when we purchased it. It's been that way for a very long time, but it's a lot of pavement, and it's not really something that we would choose if we were to design it from the beginning. We haven't made any decisions on what the replacement trees would be. We are very open to suggestions on that, and also want to note that our backyard can support some of those trees. They don't all need to be in the front. So I don't think that we would be able to support them all on our property, but we do have space on the rear as well.
Well, thank you. I would ask one, how deep is the addition from the existing house forward? Do you know that distance roughly? Or
we don't have
a final
drawings on that. It's something we're still working out. Yeah. But
you said that it will interfere with the existing roots.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing is that you've sort of got a permeable driveway as it is, because the damage to the asphalt is significant.
Yes.
I just there and noticed that, and the photographs don't show that up very well, does it? So then the other question I would have for you before I open it to the table is the notion of working with Gord and the Parks people over perhaps retaining possibilities around retaining some of your trees or not. And then, of course, you just mentioned about the replacement trees. That's quite clear what your answer was there, and discussing that, which I appreciate. But I was just curious about, because in our recommendation, we're talking about working with you and trying to maintain as many of the private trees as possible. Keep in mind that we're trying to establish a recommendation that we would give to council, who are the final decision makers anyhow. But as a member of council, I can sort of see the perspective here. It's nice to get some of that information dealt with here. But anyway, would you speak to that idea about working with Parks on retaining some of your trees? Is there something you can say to that?
My understanding actually was that it's only the center trees that we would be removing if we couldn't remove them all, because the other four, so the two city and then two others adjacent to it, are actually grown in a stand together. So there's two separate tree stands. So it's that the whole stand of trees, either taking them all or not at all. And it's basically comes down to I would love to retain as many as possible. Like we would definitely keep that stand if they aren't going to be compromised by the planned work, right? Which is where we kind of just don't really know how to move forward.
That's great. Thanks for that answer. I think that helps me in terms of the decision we're trying to make here. Anyone else like to ask a question of Emily? Charlotte. Okay, Charlotte, please.
Emily, I'd like to thank you for your letter. I thought it was very well put together. I especially liked that you mentioned that your plans include a secondary suite, which will help, one of the challenges Colwood is facing now. And also that more sun in your yard would allow you to install solar panels on your roof. So I think those speak in your favor. But I'm curious too about the wood usage. So the arborist report indicated that the trees were solid. And so I'm wondering if you have any plans to use that wood somehow in your plans.
So the arborist that we are using some of the trees will be actually used that they'll be taking for lumber. And we haven't really thought any further about the remainder of the wood. But if there's kind of ideas, we'd love to hear them.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Emily, thanks for the letter there. I have two questions. The first question is, do you know what the footprint of the driveway is going to be? Are you planning on still having that like horseshoe kind of shape, or are you just doing one long straight driveway? Just trying to, get where the new driveway is going to go and the services so that, how the trees would be affected.
Yes, so I do have plans here. The plans that we have are contingent on all of the trees being removed, and we would have to revisit it if we keep the one stand, but it's more like a U or sorry, like a kind of a C. Is there somebody that I can give these to? So I've got 3 pages there. I talked about kind of the phases that we were planning on doing things in. So the first page just kind of shows what we have now and where utilities approximately are or will need to be. Second page shows kind of the idea with the landscaping and the driveway. And the third shows the approximate location and size of the addition.
That's wonderful. I think we're getting copies made. Take a look at it. Any more further questions? Are you all right there, Devon? You can always push your button again and it turns your light off.
Okay.
When you're finished.
Sounds good.
So
I guess the other question that's really top of mind, and I do have a follow up to your response, but just to start thinking about it is how many trees were you planning on keeping if you're going to replant the trees on the property? How many are you thinking if we assume 20 that need to be replanted?
It would be really dependent on the species of trees, I think, and the size and what they need. We haven't gotten quite there yet, but at least half of them I think could be supported on our.
That sounds great. And then, so the last clarification, I was just looking since I don't have the drawing in front of me. I really like the 4 trees in the corner, the 2 city ones. And to me, that would be great. They're retained, but I guess the issue there is you have service lines that would, and those service lines can't be rerouted towards the existing driveway. Like where you're planning to put your future, like, can you put a elbow in it and then just go around that? And then the last comment I'll have, and then you don't have to hear from me again, is I really like the idea of removing. I'm supportive actually of the idea of removing that center stand, but there is one really large diameter tree in that stand, which would be really nice if we could find a way to mitigate losing that, but I can understand, you know, following hazards of limbs and all that. So first and foremost is safety, but those are me just thinking out loud. And I look forward to seeing your drawing. And thanks for listening to my ideas.
So the root systems of both stands of trees span our entire driveway. So I'm not sure if rerouting services to the other side, it's still going to affect the roots, which are all interconnected. If you know, trenching through some roots, not removing all of them, if that allows us to keep the one stand of tree, I don't know. None of the arborist reports kind of addressed that aspect of it, so I'm not really sure. We could do some further digging into that, but also our neighbor on the other side has more Douglas fir trees, and so I'd want to also make sure that their root systems, that we weren't cutting through some of the root systems of their trees as well if we were to go on the other side of the driveway. Sorry, the other question, was about the very, very large, and that is the one that is closest to our house, and I think would not be able to be retained while doing this addition, unfortunately, because it is, my kids have named that tree, so it's very sad.
Well, these drawings are a fabulous color coded. And gives us a whole new level of insight. I wish all my decisions came with such good materials. It makes it, the discussion longer, but much more meaningful. So thank you for that. And great deal of care has gone into it. So the new addition at first glance here. Doesn't come that much closer to the road, does it?
No.
Oh, I see where we are, new septic field. I'm just trying to keep in mind that the recommendation before us is to move this forward, and it seems to me the council would be happy to see this for sure. We'll make sure they have access to this information. If we follow this recommendation, I think Karen would like to speak here. I'm in a position now where I think I'm ready to move it forward with the recommendation as it sits, because there's more debate about the efficacy of maintaining some trees and removing them all. And I appreciate your perspective, and I really admire the fact that you're so open, willing to work with us and the city as well as and council here, so that we can come with a really good solution. Understand that right now, and I'm not really quite sure how to even say this, that you're kind of at a testing point in the changing times. We have this climate emergency upon us. We have an environment committee. This is new. This is only our second meeting. All the pressures that come to bear on this decision is quite interesting. And you seem to be working with us on that. And I really appreciate that too, because your insight from your perspective is really, really valuable. And your input, and it will go a long way toward making Colwood a better place, because I think it's almost like a precedent decision in a sense, sort of the way I see it. It is for me, I'm new, but so that part of it, I really feel good about. Making sure, of course, that we get the right answer is important. The fact that the housing affordability issue comes in, and it's soft density, which soft is meaning that you're adding on to an existing property, existing infrastructure, and yet you're increasing density of housing density, which is an affordability issue. It's tied to all these different elements. And so that really adds another layer of consideration. And the fact that you're adding solar panels or considering it, I've got them at my house. It's great to be on your little micro utility. It's a fabulous feeling when it turns on and you see it. I think that it also then touches on an element that we're working at, lowering GHG production in Colwood. Anyway, I'll let Karen here ask her question, because I could yammer all afternoon, I'm sure. Where'd you go, Karen? There you are. Thank you.
Hi, Emily. And like others said, thank you for coming. And I really appreciate your letter because it really broadened the context of what you want to do. And your plans are fabulous. As David said, lots of care and thoughtfulness has gone into what you want to do. And I appreciate your sentiments about the trees because clearly we all feel conflicted. And I agree with David. It's like the cusp of, you know, if we are increasing density, you know, clearly we're going to lose a lot of trees. So I have two questions. And you just stated earlier that you would possibly look at retaining the 2 city trees and the other 2, the island of 4.
Yes, that's right.
But in your letter, you say the entire purpose of removing any trees is negated if we can't take out all of them. So could you, I'll ask the second question as well. And so would you be willing, if Gord is willing, to work as a sort of a pilot project for a replanting scheme so that we could perhaps use this example going forward for other citizens to decide, you know, whether they want to follow the same route as you did. And it would be really worthwhile, I think, to us because we have a 4-year term to see in a year or so what obstacles have occurred, you know, has the replanting been successful, what species were. And lastly, I just want to say congrats on the solar panels, fabulous idea. And I would encourage you maybe not to rehook up the gas line.
I'll just interject here quickly. I think that's very nice, Karen. Thank you for those comments. The idea of some sort of a pilot project working with the city on that, I think is, you know, it's got merit, no doubt, but I think is a completely separate item. And we'll need to deal with that separately. It's great to have the idea put forward, that's for sure. And we can discuss it, but you're welcome to speak to it, but it really does add another element. So anyway, if you'd like to speak, answer if there's some more to say, that'd be great.
So when I said in my letter that, you know, the purpose of removing any trees is negated, from the information that I had, doing anything to the driveway, and maybe I'm wondering, you know, how much impact, but our arborist report was saying that even removing our existing driveway, just leaving it as is, if we were to remove that center stand of trees, and then we're to take up our driveway and replace it, just leaving the footprint, that causes additional stress to the other trees. And so if we can't really replace our driveway at all, if we can't do anything, let alone, you know, run the utilities, then it's not, why would we take down that center stand? We're not going to take down trees to do nothing. We don't want to take down trees just to take down trees.
Thank you very much.
And the pilot project, I would be really interested in hearing more of what you had in mind, but yeah.
Thank you very much. Again, in reference to the recommendation, I'm prepared to call for a motion to make the recommendation as written. Any more comments? Questions? Emily, I would offer you the opportunity to say anything more that you'd like to at this moment, or just as we'll be moving on from here.
Okay.
But
so I'm not sure what you mean by the recommendation as written.
oh, okay. So what we have before us is a recommendation. I'll just read it to you because that's the form at which we will deal with it. That staff, so this is the recommendation, that staff at City Hall here work with the resident at 608 Kelly Road with respect to retaining 2 protected mature Douglas fir trees located in the city right of way, and as many of the private trees as possible. So the last bit of that recommendation is really brings you into it, because that's affecting your trees. And Gord, you had spoken earlier, maybe you could clarify for me that indeed those 8 trees that Emily has on her property could be removed according to the existing bylaw.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So we understand that you can remove the 8 trees that are on your property. The 2 city trees, then we would need to decide whether to remove them at the same time, presumably, or let them stand. And that's a decision we need to make. However, I think that the purpose of the intent of this recommendation that we as a committee will make to council, who will make the final decision, is to work with you on perhaps retaining things. And that's where I think your openness and willingness to speak with us and work with us is really commendable. It makes my decision a lot easier, certainly here at the committee table, to move it forward and make this recommendation as it's written. Unless you think, is there something you'd like to add at this point?
I just kind of want to clarify, just because this is new to me. So the recommendation is to just get us involved with somebody in the city who will help us navigate this further, try to find different ways to retain them. And if that's not possible, then
I think we revert to the fact that Emily has the choice, right? The resident has the choice to remove those 8 trees. Can you help me with that, Gord, or perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, according to the bylaw, you can't remove trees and in doing so damage protected trees in that process. So removing the trees is definitely something that, you know, is well within the bylaw for the private property there. It's when we get into the removal of the stumps is where we get into, it will cause damage, and it will cause the 2 remaining trees to fail. There would be we would not be able to retain them. The middle stand is the arborist feels, the city contractor arborist feels that if those stumps are started to pull, they very well will compromise the roots of not the 2 city trees, but also the 2 other trees in that stand to the left. So that's where we get to where the bylaw states you can't remove trees and cause other trees to fail. Where we could remove the trees and retain our trees, then that's well within the bylaw. Is that
Okay, thanks,
I muddied
Gord.
the water more?
The whole issue gets more intertwined like tree roots tend to do. I think so. What I'm hearing is that if the trees were removed on your property so that to prevent undue effect on the city trees, you would have to not remove the stumps entirely. Is that my understanding from the report? That they would be cut at a certain minimum height and left?
Cut to grade.
So the roots in the ground are left. Presumably the asphalt would have to be very gently removed to allow some new acceptable type of driveway applied over top of those roots. Yeah, it gets really complicated very quickly, doesn't it?
There are ways to mitigate roots. Like I mentioned one with stump grinding. Then there are practices like hydro excavating, that sort of thing around critical root zones. So there are ways to work around the critical root zone while still protecting them.
It's expensive though, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so now it's even clear as mud, right? For you.
yeah.
Well, I think what this says, and I'm going to say this from a counselor perspective, is that we've unearthed a great deal of material here today in this past hour around this request. And I'm pretty happy with the amount of information we've got, and the decision could be made. It's going to ultimately to be made by council. And I still think that the recommendation as it's written probably serves the purpose. But for your information, that's not a decision here today.
Okay.
We're really simply we're simply passing this recommendation to council. That's our task.
Okay,
Advise council.
okay.
Then you might be back, and hopefully you will be.
At
And council will
meeting.
have the
Okay.
benefit of your good drawing and all the other information and more, if there's more coming,
Okay,
to inform their decision.
okay.
And they,
That's helpful. Thank you.
yeah, well, thank you. You're very patient with us and willing to dialogue. That's really important, I think. And as some of the members who have spoken in the meeting today, there's elements to this discussion that bears consideration beyond even just how it applies to you, which is helping us to develop our policies as we go,
Mhm.
which is all part of building a good system and city. So unless someone else has something to add, I would, well, thank you very much, Emily. Appreciate your.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome. I would call for the motion to for the recommendation. Shall I read it again? Is there any need? Yeah, you'd like me to read it? That's we recommend, the Environment Committee recommends to council that staff work with the resident at 608 Kelly Road with respect to retaining 2 protected mature Douglas fir trees located in the city right of way, and as many of the private trees as possible. Any questions, discussion? Thank you. Just give me a second, Karen. Anywhere?
I would really like to support the recommendation that these 2 city trees be retained. But given all the information we have and your letter and plans and Gord's, expanding on the root grinding process, I honestly don't see how 2 city trees can be retained, and I think we would be creating a big headache for you. And you've been very forthcoming in your plans and a very difficult situation for the city. Which is why I would hope that there could be a follow-up to the replanting process, and maybe it be a model for, because I imagine, Emily, when your trees come down, all your neighbors are going to be saying, hey, didn't know we could do that, and there'll be lots more requests coming to council.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else? A call for the vote, question? All those in favor? The recommendation? Opposed? Okay. So you got that one, Karen Woodland opposed? 2 opposed, sorry, and Charlotte Garley opposed. But it has passed. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, 5.2, Iain Bourhill, Director of Community Planning, will speak to us about the current major environmental projects ongoing in Colwood. Iain, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to be joined today by several of my colleagues, including Nafisa Rashviandar, our parks planner, Joshua Bayless, Manager of Engineering, Gord Beauvillier, Manager of Parks, Byron Grant, Manager of Building Inspections and Bylaw Services. So we're going to, as a group, go through a compilation of environmental projects we thought that the committee would benefit from in terms of having an overview and also having a chance to ask questions. These are projects that we suspect council may decide to refer to the committee for recommendation in the future. So we think it's important that you be advised in advance. So first up is Mr. Grant with our step code.
Good afternoon, Environmental Committee. I'm Byron Grant, Manager of Building and Bylaw Services here in Colwood. don't have any speaking notes prepared today, but I could give you an idea of where we're at now and where we're going to be at shortly here. So right now we are at step 3 for Part 9 buildings, and then also up to 6 stories of wood framed residential, and then step 2 for remaining commercial buildings. And then our next steps, no pun intended, are going to be July 1st of this year. We will be at either step 5 or a step 3 with a low carbon energy system. A year from that, next year, July 1st, 2024, we will be at step 5, or sorry, for that was for Part 9 buildings. This is this first move here coming up shortly. And then next year, our next move will be Part 3 buildings. So that, for context, our buildings over 600 meters squared and over 3 stories in height. And that will be the same optional approach where you go step 4 or step 3 with a low carbon energy system. So what a low carbon energy system is basically a cap of emissions for your operational carbon in a building. So obviously the low hanging fruit are heat and hot water, moving towards electric. So and then basically there are 2 approaches that local governments can and have taken. Recently there were code changes which allowed for prescriptive caps, so required caps on emissions. They were formerly referred to as carbon pollution standards in the building code, and are now referred to complicate things maybe a bit more, step code low carbon. So you can either, as a local government, adopt one of those standards, or you can do what Colwood has done and other municipalities have done, where you require a higher level of energy efficiency or a lower one with a cap on carbon emissions, which in our research essentially achieves the same thing. Yeah, so it's a quick overview, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Pamela?
So the city of Victoria and Saanich just adopted 0 carbon. Is there some reason why Colwood cannot do the same?
Thank you for the question through the chair. It was a council direction to go with the optional approach, where you require a higher step or a lower one with a cap on carbon emissions. And then also it was better received in the building community. So essentially you're achieving the same thing. The metric is identical to what Saanich and Victoria have adopted. It just gives you more options as a builder, if that answers your question.
I guess what kind of options, if it's okay for me to ask specifically?
Absolutely. So an example would be in Victoria, and I forget what the effective date is. Ours is in place here coming up in July. You would be required to build to step 3 with an added step low carbon option. So it's the metric of how much carbon your operational systems can emit. And what we've done is essentially the same thing, or you have to have a really stringent energy efficiency to the building, if that makes sense. Lois?
Is there some place where we can read up on what this step code is?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's a lot of that on the internet these days. I mean,
No, but for Colwood.
yeah, our website is up to date with where we are at right now. And then it also has a lot of links to, the provincial websites, the timeline of where we're at provincially, that sort of thing.
So you just go on the website and search for energy step code implementation.
I'm confident if you Googled Colwood step code, it would take you to that page. But if you go to City of Colwood and then building permits and inspections, you'll find a step code link in there.
Thank you. I think that the Google approach sometimes is quicker.
Yeah, helps me sometimes. But yeah, and then for context, there are other municipalities that have also done the.
So could you say that again? Colwood Building and Code?
Oh, it would be Colwood and then under building inspections and services. So you'd see development services, plan, engineering, building on there.
So if we go to that, then we'd find energy step code
Yeah.
as a topic.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely not hard to find something on step code on the internet right now. So, but yeah, for context, there are other municipalities that have gone with what's referred to as the step up, step down approach is what Colwood has taken. So, New Westminster, North Vancouver, Surrey, and then more locally, District of Highlands. Last time I checked, District of Central Saanich also went with the same approach. The benefits were at the time that we could get policy and bylaw in place while it was still up in the air with the prescriptive approach. So we're leading that way where it's in effect here coming July 1st.
Thank you. You're good. Karen.
Hi, Byron, and I wanted to say that the report you gave the night you made the recommendation to council, it was an excellent report. It's actually good reading, very worthwhile reading. And I do think Colwood was leading in that sense, but I'm a little concerned that municipalities are always having to sort of make the tough decisions when it comes to building energy. And I wonder if you are aware of anything coming down the line from either the provincial or the federal government where they might, because of the climate emergency, put stronger provincial or federal requirements into the building code and not leave it up to the municipalities to determine what level, because we do then end up with a patchwork across the province. So have you heard of anything?
Yes, certainly. Through the chair, a good example of that is the forget about the low carbon side of things and just step code on its own. The term step code itself, it's meant to be incremental, and ultimately the province has a target of 2032 for it to be essentially using as much or getting as much energy on site as the building uses. So neutral that way. A good example is step code, because right now step 3 for energy step code is required across the province. So they have their own timeline. They gave local governments an opportunity to try to bring their building industry up to speed, get people used to it. But as of May this year, it is required across the province. So I imagine it'll be the same thing with the low carbon step code, or sorry, the low carbon, was it step code low carbon? Because they changed it from the carbon pollution standards recently. That's why it confuses me. But it'll be the same thing where they have targets and then it will be mandatory at certain stages. So this just gives local governments an opportunity to get ahead of those. If that answers your question.
Yeah. So just, one comment regarding that is that a lot of people would say that it's taking too long. The climate crisis is now, and that something needs to be, there needs to be some dramatic changes now. Our clocks run out. But I guess to that end, I had questions regarding heat pumps and, what that's looking like in terms of getting, builders to, make sure that those are what's installed instead of gas lines. and where we're at on that, and in terms of possibly just mandating that builders do that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, it's easy for us to say, as a local government incentivizing. That's not exactly how the building community looks at it, but in answer to your question, with this next move in July, that will essentially make your heating system electric in houses. So, and then the most practical way to do that while achieving ventilation requirements and everything is a heat pump. So that's what we're going to see a lot of. I mean, when you get to smaller units and townhouses, multifamily buildings, sometimes the most practical way to do that is with electric baseboard. But certainly in houses, it will make it that your heating system has to be electric, and we would imagine that would be a heat pump to achieve that. Did I answer that?
Thank you. We can probably move on and next, unless there's more questions.
Final comment, please feel free to reach out. Personally, I'm happy to answer. I've talked about this stuff till I'm blue in the face, so happy to chat more with anyone about that.
That's perfect. Thank you.
So moving on, we've only got 22 more slides, so I'll touch on them quickly, and by all means, please pause for questions, but I'll try to plow through here. So next up on our list is our Active Transportation Network Plan. This plan was endorsed by Council for master planning purposes and also referred to a couple other committees earlier this year. And we're planning to come back to Council with a final draft on July 10th, so coming up pretty quick. Our Colwood Natural Asset Inventory. This was our first inventory of natural assets here in Colwood that was completed in 2022. Just about a year ago, Council resolved that the natural asset inventory be integrated into the city's asset management framework, including the city's GIS database. And also, Council also directed that us to use the natural assets register and make sure that it's updated to support best practice asset management program. So next up is our GoCo ride sharing app. So this is a fantastic tool that the city developed for commuters. A lot of Colwoodians drive outside of Colwood to get to their places of work. And this allows them to post rides and then offer available seats in their vehicles to those that need rides. It also allows users to set pricing for the rides and actually receive some compensation for providing people with rides. So it's quite a neat app. And the city is also working with several major employers to help them coordinate with their employees. Next up is our coastal adaptation project. This is a project that is intended to address coastal inundation risk, coastal flooding risk due to sea level rise from climate impacts, as well as storm activity that we're expecting in the coming years. We've already done the work to identify the floodplains, and we are integrating that into our waterfront stewardship plan. It is going to then move from the public realm in terms of how we're using this data and applying it to new things to mitigate risks such as flood construction level for private properties. We're hoping to get that started on the heels of the waterfront stewardship plan later this year. As I mentioned, our waterfront stewardship plan is in draft right now. This is a comprehensive plan for our city's waterfront with a focus on the stretch between Lagoon Bridge and the future Royal Beach waterfront. It includes a 10-year capital plan for mostly park improvements and ecosystem regeneration works. We are right now compiling a draft that is going to be informed by a detailed coastal engineering analysis. And we're going to be bringing that back to council on July 10th. At that point, we'll be asking for council's endorsement for this draft with the recommended changes from our coastal engineering report. to go to the public stakeholders and partners for final comment. And our hope is that in the late summer, we can adopt the plan. Next is our waterfront park expansion project. This is an initiative to extend our current waterfront lease in front of Esquimalt Lagoon for our waterfront parks along the coastline to the Royal Beach Park network. So we'd be integrating our foreshore park system with the upland park that's proposed for Royal Beach. This is a project that's currently funded in the financial plan for 2024. Next is our climate action plan. So council earlier this year endorsed a draft climate action plan, the goals of which were for Colwood to be net zero by 2050. It includes both adaptation and emission mitigation objectives, as well as maximizing co-benefits. So I'd also like to announce that Colwood has hired its first climate planner, who is working through the final draft and will be helping the city with implementation. So this final draft of the plan is scheduled to come before council on August 28th of this year. And it's currently being revised based on feedback that we received through the public engagement period. So we undertook a master planning exercise for the city's park system several years ago, and now we're implementing it through a series of park management plans. So far, we've completed park management plans for Colwood Creek Park, Lagoon West Park, Latoya Creek, and Havenwood Park. Next up, planned for starting this year is Harm Williams Park, Meadow Park, and Outlook Park. We're also looking at Quarry Park, which is a planned park as part of the Royal Bay development, with inclusion of a potential Colwood Recreation Center that we're looking at doing a feasibility study this year. So it's quite exciting. Anything to add, Gord?
As far as where we are in the implementation of the recommendations through the park plans, we are working through short-term recommendations for Colwood Creek Park right now, including riparian assessment for restoration along Colwood Creek, tree canopy inventory and assessment through Colwood Creek, and trail upgrades, as well as design and costing for park washroom, expanded spray park, and playground.
A related project is the development of a parks development cost charge programs for Colwood. So this entails us developing a new funding source through development contributions on a per unit basis for both park improvements and park acquisition. So as a first step, we're developing a park improvements development cost charge bylaw. That bylaw is now in draft form and scheduled to come before council next week on June 26th. We're hoping that council is able to provide it 3 readings on that night, and then we have to refer it to the province for approval. And then we're expecting later towards the end of summer, we're able to adopt the park improvement DCC bylaw. Following that, we're hoping to come back to council with a sister bylaw, which would be focusing on development cost charges for specific park acquisitions. Next up is our Parks Canada initiative, which I'm going to pass the mic over to our parks planner. Thank you.
Thanks, Iain. Hi, everyone. I'm Nafisa Rashidian. I'm the City of Colwood Parks Planner, and I'm working with Parks Canada for the National Urban Parks initiative. So I give you a little bit of background of the National Urban Parks. So back in 2021, Government of Canada funded to create 6 candidate sites for the national urban parks. So to accomplish this, they are working with local government, local First Nation organization, and also other federal government to create a network of the national urban parks in a sort of Canada's large scale and in the urban centers. As it's stated by Parks Canada, Victoria Greater Area is one of the candidate sites, and the study area is stated as Bourhill area and the nearby areas of interest for Indigenous partners. And I would like to mention that this project is going to be Indigenous-led throughout the process. So, City of Colwood is considered as one of the key partners of Parks Canada and the First Nation that we are negotiating at this point. And we are in an early exploratory pre-feasibility study stage. We are looking through the options that we have, and we are doing the sort of building up the partnership with the partners and going through the engagement and make sure that we have all the partners involved at this point. So we have ongoing negotiation, and as the city is one of the key partner, the city is developing an ecosystem regeneration strategy, and we are doing pre-feasibility studies on active transportation and public transit. And the other project that we are working on is developing the engagement strategy for the stakeholders' involvement in the future. The project goal for the ecosystem regeneration strategy is regenerated ecosystem through invasive species management and native species education, ensuring that this strategy will be ecologically effective, economically efficient, and socioculturally engaging. So other than the ecological aspect of the project, we are considering the cultural aspect of the area, and that's why we have all the partners negotiating at this time. The second project that we are working on is the active transportation pre-feasibility studies, and the project goal is complete a study to assess the feasibility of having an active transportation network directly connecting to the future national urban parks area and provide accessibility to the nature. Meanwhile, it improves physical and mental health and also increase the vibrancy and prosperity for the community. So basically, the key goal of this project is connecting people, including the residents and the visitors, to the national urban parks through active transportation and public transit. And the last project that we are focusing on right now is engagement strategy. And we are developing strategy that the key goal is creating a productive and ongoing positive culture for the partners for their commitment to the National Urban Parks Initiative. And the city's role in this project is to develop a strategy between the National Urban Parks project key partners and also facilitate the engagement between the key partners and stakeholders. So I'll leave it here and I will ask Iain to continue. Thank you.
Thanks, Nafisa. So I've got one more and then we're going to be passing the mic again to our manager of engineering. So next up is a project that's being managed by our development services team. It's the Latoria Visioning exercise, which is looking at how we can best guide development in this area of Colwood such that we can support and enhance the ecology around Latoria Creek. This project is currently in progress with an update scheduled to come before council in the third quarter. Next up is some engineering projects. Mr. Bayless is going to speak to. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joshua Bayless, Manager of Engineering. So this year, we're planning to come forward with a new transportation master plan. The old one is from 2015. There's a lot of documents that influence that this year. So we've got some corridor studies on Suk and Machosen, the active transportation network plan that Iain was mentioning. All of those will be considered and then an update brought forward to council probably in the fall. Questions? Latoria Environmental and Geotechnical. So this is actually quite linked with the visioning exercise that Iain just mentioned that Development Services is working on. So we did a large geotechnical and environmental study on the Latoria Creek, and we'll be working with that information and probably leveraging that along with our visioning exercise to look at next steps in that corridor. And that may happen this year, it may get pushed into next year. We just want to make sure we do it right. The sewer master plan. So we are breaking this into two updates right now, but ultimately inside of this year, we want to bring forward Colwood's intention with sewer. It's sort of twofold right now. We've got the allocation that we have at McLaughlin Point through the CRD wastewater treatment plant. And then on top of that, we'll be bringing forward a full master plan update. And that'll look at things around how we gather sanitary sewer right now. Do we plan on sewering existing residents or do we let developers expand that and use up the capacity? So there's a lot of different competing pieces to that. So we'll be bringing that forward and potentially that will come across your desks as well. Transit infrastructure improvement. So what we've done with this year is there's a program through BC Transit where they run a grant where you can apply for updating existing bus stops. And we were successful this year, which is great. So we've got 2 new bus stops coming. One is on Ben Homer near Painter, and the other one is on Carindale near VMP. We basically put this on our running to-do list every year and we apply every year and we've been successful for the last few. And we hope to maintain that moving forward. The last one. So we've got the Galloping Goose pedestrian bridge. So this right now, the process, we're in the middle of the RFP. Evaluations are happening with council right now. We hope to be able to come forward with the recommendation from council and ultimately the award inside of July. So that'll be really exciting for the community to be able to see which proponent gets chosen by council, what direction we're going in. Each proponent has unique designs with different schedules, different ways of implementing, getting the goals across, but that's something we'll be looking forward to this year as well. That's it from me.
Thanks, Joshua. Thank you.
We save the best for last.
Yeah.
Our urban forest strategy.
The best for last. We referred to the urban forest strategy earlier with the residents permit request. In 2021, through our service review for parks, there was council direction to create an urban forest strategy for Colwood. In 2022, we completed the first phase of that strategy. We are now working through phase 2, which most of the technical stuff was done phase 1. A lot of the GIS and the mapping and so now we're going to move into canopy forecasting with some engagement through some public engagement with stakeholders, And hoping to have a urban forest strategy draft by Q4 of this year.
Thank you. Thanks, Gord.
So, Mr. Chair, that concludes our presentation of major environmental projects. Happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's a good opportunity, folks, to hear. But Devin, just give me a second here to get you up. There you are, Devin.
Yeah, thanks. I actually have a question for Josh there about the transportation master plan. So there's actually a few questions here, but does the charging infrastructure include, like, is there a lot of charging infrastructure included in the master plan?
The current master plan or the?
Yeah, the current or the upcoming, like, where are we going essentially?
Yeah, I think we've actually broken that out as a separate initiative being run through Public Works right now, but I can get back to you with details. Oh, sounds like we have some details.
Thanks, Josh. So, Mr. Chair, I'll just actually add to Mr. Bayless's response by noting that the previous council, we brought forward a draft parking bylaw. It initially intended to have electric vehicle charging requirements integrated into that bylaw. Decision was made to split those off as a separate project, other than electric bicycle parking, which is in the parking bylaw. We're looking at a standalone project following the climate action plan, either this year or next, that would look at specific requirements for council to consider relative to EV charging.
Sorry, I got some more here. That one really piqued my interest. Has there been any consideration about like how the transportation plan might be impacted by like a robo-taxi program? There's speculation that, you know, robo-taxis may replace the bus system in the future. So has there been any consideration in terms of the robo-taxi or automated kind of driving?
Thank you for that question through the chair. We actually started thinking about quite a while what we call the autonomous vehicles back when we did the last official committee plan amendment in 2018. So there's actually a section in that document that speaks to the potential for autonomous vehicles and the need for the city to adapt and plan for you know, the different types of requirements our roads and parking infrastructure would need to be reviewed. That being said, I'm not sure if Mr. Bayless has any other comments relative to our transportation master plan, but suffice to say, it is something that we've identified as being important.
Good on you for looking forward. It's definitely a kind of emerging interest there. And then the last one, it might be beyond Colwood's jurisdiction, but has there been any discussion about, I know CRD at one point was looking at revitalizing the Iain rail line, and, you know, so that we don't have the traffic jams instead of just putting more cars on the road, like having light rail or transit?
Once again, thank you for that question. I'll maybe start through the chair, and if there's any additional comments that Mr. Bayless wants to make. So the current regional plan for rapid transit is called the Transit Futures Plan. It was developed back in 2011. It called for a rapid transit corridor to follow the Trans-Canada Highway corridor and then travel through the West Shore at the Colwood exit up Island Highway. And then onto Langford via Goldstream Avenue. The first phase of that plan in terms of its implementation is now intended to be through Rapid Bus. That's represented by the new Blink Rapid Bus service, Route 95 that BC Transit just launched earlier this year. The first phase of which is the Route 95 that serves the West Shore and the core. The second phase of which is to extend that the rapid bus network into the peninsula. The work that we're doing with transit right now includes improving transit lanes as well as queue jumper lanes on Island Highway. Yeah, that's an exciting part of our work with transit right now.
Thank you. Pamela, next.
You. A few questions. One was just out of curiosity. What was there a specific program or map used to determine sea level rise?
Thank you for that question through the chair. So a number of years ago, there was a regional project that Colwood partnered with the Capital Regional District on that saw us hiring a team of coastal engineers led by Associate Engineering. They undertook a study that developed a model and predicted sea level rise for the entire region. Colwood then hired that same team to provide high resolution coastal flood inundation mapping for specific to our municipality, as well as a tsunami risk assessment report. That information is now available for us to operationalize as part of a coastal adaptation plan. The first phase, as I said, was really looking at the city's property and our parks infrastructure and how we compare for sea level rise through what we're proposing through our waterfront stewardship plan. We're looking at nature-based approaches and what is referred to as a green shores principles in that work. And then moving on to protecting other parts of our waterfront through regulatory changes that we will be hopefully working through later this year.
And was it like determined on, you know, usually when you see sea level rise maps, it has like, okay, if it's, 1 degree temperature change to like 4 degree temperature change.
Yes.
How was that addressed?
So the acronyms trip me up sometimes, but for our projections that were used in our coastal flood inundation mapping, we use the relative concentration pathway RCP 8.4, I believe, which is at the time one of the worst case scenarios in terms of the projections of sea level rise. That was used to be conservative relative to the risk that's entailed by coastal flooding.
Okay, thank you.
One more.
Yeah, one more real quick. I'll try and be really, really quick. So the tree bylaw is going to coincide with the report that comes out from the urban forest strategy people. Is that how that's working and how they're?
Through a motion brought by Councillor Day, we are making amendments, interim amendments to our bylaw, which is coming very quickly. And then there are recommendations through the urban forest strategy that will speak to increased revision of our urban forest bylaw that will coincide with the urban forest strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Karen.
Thank you. Great presentation. Lots of really good things happening. And I'm just wondering if you have any, like Devin mentioned, EV charging. I understand the CRD Climate Initiative is going to focus on EV charging and building retrofits. Do you want to comment on that? Thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, so Colwood partnered with the Capital Regional District on an application to receive funding. I believe it was a federal grant to install a number of level 2 chargers in Colwood parks as an initial phase. That we're still waiting on the outcome of that grant application. I believe there was 8 or 9 installations included in that application, of which 100% of the capital costs would be funded. So we're hopeful that that's our next step with respect to EV charging for the greater community.
Okay, I have to just hold on a second. Give you reset you, Karen. Okay, could you ask again?
Just anything further on building retrofits, working with the CRD?
Yes. Yes, we have actually had some recent inquiries from strata representatives, and they're keen to hear about this, what we hope to be a comprehensive look at how the city is requiring electric vehicle charging in new construction. As it relates to retrofits, we are through our climate planner and building inspection teams trying to help homeowners navigate the different incentives that are available from the province and the federal government, as well as the Capital Regional District. Colwood had at one point provided what we call top-up incentive grants to homeowners that were doing qualifying retrofits. We could look at potentially in the future that being a future approach to incentivizing retrofits for EV charging in buildings as well. We expect once the climate action plan is in place that we will be approaching council with options to look at that.
Thanks, Ian. I think maybe we have time, do we, for one few more questions? So the names always change. There we are. Emma.
Thank you. Sorry. Within the climate action plan that is being planned, is there any part of it addressing volunteerism and community coordination? I know that came up about having a paid volunteer position, but is there being any kind of consideration of a volunteer coordinator and things like that?
Through the chair, yes, I'm trying to think of the section off the top of my head, but there are specific objectives around the city partnering with organizations and interested citizens. As a first step, we haven't waited for the plan to be finalized before taking some important first steps. As was mentioned earlier, the step code's being implemented. We've also struck an internal working group we call it CCAT. So it's our Colwood Climate Action team, which is made up of departmental representatives from across the organization. Really starting to build that internal team for climate action. And then also once the plan's complete, we hope to be able to work with different individuals. In terms of a formal volunteer role, Colwood is also looking at a volunteer coordinator type function that was presented to council, I guess, last council meeting. And we can certainly look at how best to affect change in the community through the climate action plan, through volunteers moving forward. I can't say exactly how the proposed approach to volunteer coordination would address climate, but it's certainly something that's on our minds.
Okay. We're never going to go home. Karen.
One for me, I promise. Do you have, we're new, we're trying to get more familiar and clear on the terms of reference. We understand that recommendations come from council, but I wonder if you, given your level of expertise and history here, have some recommendations for us as to how we can best support you.
Oh, thank you for that thoughtful question through the chair. So as you can see, there is quite a bit of work that is nearing completion, about to be undertaken based on council's existing direction. The terms of reference for this committee see that the council refer items for recommendations or comment to the Environment Committee. So we wanted to highlight some of those projects that council may ask for input from this committee for a deeper understanding. So really in terms of helping us is to acknowledge that we're sort of like a ship that's going in a direction, hopefully towards a much better place relative to our environmental performance, and that there's a lot of work going on and a lot of steam built up towards hopefully a brighter future. So
thank you for the answer, Ian. I was going to, and I have to admit, I told everyone beforehand I was planning to add a 5.3 item where we could maybe zero in on this communication letters to council situation and how we can get encourage agenda items to appear. We can do that, or perhaps we're dealing with it now. Well, how do we? Yeah. Yeah, because I forgot to do that. That was all on me. Anyhow, Charlotte, you have your light. Why don't you go ahead?
Is it possible for us to have a list of these initiatives? Because as a new committee, we're trying to figure out where we fit and, as Karen said, how we can best support. So one way, a starting point for that might be to figure out what's already happening that we can, express our interest in.
Thank you for that. I just need to emphasize that the committee, as set up by council, has a mandate to comment on items that are referred to it by council. So there's that flow of information that comes under the terms of reference. The best document that has that overarching list of projects is in our annual service review. We can share a link to that document. It has on the departmental level the priorities that are set for administration by council on an annual basis. It speaks to previous year's priorities, their status, as well as the upcoming year's priorities. So in developing the presentation today, we really took a subset of the projects that are listed in that service review document.
Thank you.
Does that solve or answer your question? I think we've touched on this, the idea that we can submit, any resident of Colwood can submit a letter to council or which would appear on the agenda to be referred perhaps to the Environment Committee or any committee, we don't know, right? So I think we're free to make those submissions. The question of how to find or place it within the body of work that goes on here, it still baffles my mind because there's so much going on, and some of these projects are huge and they overlap, as we found with the tree item on the agenda. Was very interesting how different elements come in to help form a decision. And if anyone has any more I did want to say one thing about the business of us sending in information. When we send a letter to city mayor and council and so on, it goes through corporate services, it does use up some staff time. So I would encourage everyone to be sure that it's very thoughtful of what you've done. We don't want to use staff time, well, we want to use it, but most valuably that we can, in the most valuable way that we can. I think as time goes, we'll refine our process and the way we're working. And this has been for me today very, very useful, because the title of this committee, Environment Committee, is really just a little bit broad. So that I think that we've all come to this effort with common goals, but it's a big goal and it contains so much in detail. So I hope everyone has benefited today as much as I have, and conversations can continue. And I would also like to emphasize that the conversations around this committee and items that we're dealing with can happen right here at the table, at the committee table. This is like prime time. This is where we want to do it and move decisions forward. So thanks for all your good questions today, and of course answers. I sort of have a lot to say, but really I can't formulate it in a way that I think comes across in any way efficiently. I guess we're all a bit stumped, or I felt that way with this committee from the start, but already we're just at our second meeting. It's early yet. Thank you, Iain. And so from here, I would offer and invite any of you to speak to the business of what we're talking here. I think is the matter of communicating, getting items on the agenda, the committee's purpose, how you feel, and so on. Maybe we can just we have a few minutes. So Karen, would you like to, also I gotta, this machine is still new to me. There we go, Karen.
Given that we only meet 4 times a year, I find it challenging to Yeah, I find it challenging to see where, you know, our effectiveness in a climate emergency, for instance, is going to be helpful. I don't want to be a, you know, a constraint to staff. I'd rather be a support to staff. And as a member of this committee, I wouldn't really feel comfortable bringing items forward as a private citizen, but maybe as a private citizen, there's more opportunity to do that.
Right, I think that's a process item. Element. Emma.
I mean, that's the impression that I got, is that, you know, if there's an initiative, if, you know, one municipality passes something and it's a matter of striking while the iron's hot, it seems to me that we need to bring this up as residents into just a regular city council meeting as a private, you know, person who lives in Colwood, that those initiatives need to be, you know, we can apply and ask for them to be put on the official council agenda and not addressed here. That's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah, and then council looks at it and decides whether to refer it to committee or not, or give other direction. And it may be another committee and not necessarily this one that council chooses to direct it to. And anyone else? I'm spent. We're spent. Anyone in the? Okay, well, I guess the call for adjournment. You need a motion for that, or can we close the meeting? Motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.